Hello again, new friends, and welcome back to the channel for Storytime with Safe. Let's jump into today's story, which is the wildest custody case ever. About 5 years ago now, I found out I had a son. He was 5 years old when I first met him, and as a 28-year-old male, I was both in shock and scared shitless. My son's mother is a real piece of work, and the fact is that so is most of her family. A friend of the court-appointed detective tracked me down at my ex-girlfriend's house where I was living at the time, and I submitted the DNA swabs. I had known of him, but when he was a couple months old, his mother bailed on a paternity suit that she had started and fled to Texas, leaving me, his father, who was in the delivery room and working 2 full-time jobs, to believe that she knew deep down I was not his father. So fast forward 5 years and my results come back a 99.99% match. I hired the best family lawyer in my city and filed a motion for custody. At this time, I had been told that my son was in foster care. After a few more days, I was informed that my son was with his grandmother and that she had a temporary placement while the legal system did what it was supposed to do. At this point in my life, I was a CNC machinist and was working as much as possible because I had been trying to save up to buy a house. Things seemed to be going as normal as possible for the first couple days. Then I finally got to meet my son. It was single-handedly the best and most moving event of my life, and I wouldn't change it for anything. My dad and his grandma were chatting while I got to spend time with him. That's when things started to go from a shitty episode of Jerry Springer to full-blown what the fuck. A day or two later, social workers showed up at my house, handing me papers to sign and explaining how the foster care system works in my state. Well, how they think it works anyway. At the end of the meeting, they asked if I would submit a drug screening, which I have nothing to hide and agreed. I was then told I'm being charged with child neglect. When asked why, they responded, "Because your son's mother chased a man down the road with a knife." Now, I'm far from unintelligent and immediately challenged this. As was told, they simply open a case on everyone. Angry, but always trying to think of what is ultimately going to be best for my child, I bite my tongue and called a lawyer. I had admitted I had taken a Norco for some back pains a day prior to the meeting that I had been given from my dad. The results somehow come back positive for cocaine. I was not told of this or even given a chance to retake the test, as it was 2 weeks later in court when I found out. And just like that, I'm now convicted of child neglect. Mind you, I don't do drugs, and I quit the party scene at least 2 years prior to this time. My lawyer stood up for me, but to no avail. That was the beginning of the worst railroading I've even heard of. I was stripped of my parental rights, and it took 2 months to get them back. Around the same time, someone impersonating my mother called my dad's employer, claiming me and my husband are getting divorced. Oh, and he is selling our son narcotics. My dad was about to retire from a position as a computer programmer for Northrop Grumman. His boss called him to let him know the strange call, as we had recently held a work party for his team at our house after a big project was finished, and it is clear that my parents are happily married. Another day or two goes by and a new social worker calls me. I dismissed this person at first. After making them prove they were with the department, we started to work out family reunification. This involved things like put my son under my insurance through my employer, which at the time cost me about $1,200 a month, got parenting classes, and a few other stipulations I can't remember. Without skipping a beat, I took care of everything I was asked to do. This whole time I'm being dragged into court 3 times a week on neglect charges, a custody trial, and I'm not sure why the 3rd appearance each week other than to degrade me on the record. My son's grandmother was, as the social worker liked to say, she's being a mama bear to protect him. The amount of slander I heard about myself from someone who had not even seen me in person in over 10 years really seemed like it was out of some kind of Hollywood action gangster film. I was suddenly suicidal, having pounds of drugs mailed to her residency so I can sell them. By the way, she lives in Texas, I live in fucking Michigan. I have charges for pistol whipping a mentally handicapped man. I beat my son's mother and disfigured her. I know you're probably thinking, wow, this sounds like it's way out there and no way the courts can take this at face value. but they eat that shit up like she was the holy fucking ghost. It culminated in her having an outburst in the court when I had finally gotten a new judge, where she yelled in my face, "Over my dead body will you take this boy?" At that point, I had no intention of taking him away from her in any way other than wanting custody of my son, since his mother is not an option. Mind you, in Michigan, there is no grandparents' rights, and I could just actually take him at any point. But this being so new for both me and him, I thought staying with his grandmother during the change would be best for him. The next court date came and went. Then that Friday, it was time for me to have my parenting time. I found out that she had packed him up and bolted the state. My son was, and still is, a ward of the state at this moment. I had been trying to tell the court, social workers, lawyers, anyone that would listen, that she had become a flight risk and was going to run and flee the state. Not one person took my concerns for my child seriously until it was far too late. She ran back to Texas and immediately goes to a courthouse asking for an emergency custody hearing on the grounds I had been physically and sexually abusing my son. At this point, I had never even been allowed an unsupervised visit with my son, and always had CPS crammed up my ass during our visits. I was told by the police when I called that there's nothing they can do, as I didn't have custody, even though my son was in the foster care system still. So I waited, thinking about any place I could remember his mom or grandma talk about from Texas and surrounding states. Never once was an Amber Alert sent, and a few weeks later, I was served with court documentation from Texas stating I was being charged with criminal sexual conduct on a minor. My stomach sank. At that point was when I decided I'm taking point and forcing the court system's hand. I tracked his grandmother down to a ranch in the Panhandle with the help of a few friends. And at the last court date that my son was missing for, I informed the court that they had a week to pick my son up at that address, or I was boarding a plane and they could follow with a couple body bags for whoever got in my way. 6 days later, my son was returned to me, and for a brief moment, things seemed like they were gonna get better. His grandma had been arrested on felony kidnapping, although not federal kidnapping. Michigan has a 25 to life guideline on that charge. I thought there would be justice for me and my son, but what really ended up happening was they dropped the charges, gave her a year of probation, and allowed her to sue me for custody immediately after it was done. Now, having sold almost everything I own, working 12-hour days, and being a single father, I was luckily able to continue to pay for my legal counsel while feeding and clothing my child, often at the cost of me going hungry for a day or two. That was 2 years ago now, and I'm at a loss on what to do. I want to call media attention to the case in the hope that no father ever again will have to go through something like this. Alright kids, that brings us to the end of the story. Now for a few thoughts. First and foremost, let me say, I'm a supporter of the police. Our justice system is broken and flawed in many ways, but used properly, it can still do some good. However, if you're ever going to speak with the police, do yourself a favor and do not do so without a lawyer present. This is true for everyone, considering the police can lie to you in order to obtain information that they want. Unfortunately, this is what happened in OP's case. If he would have kept his mouth shut, a lot of this could have been avoided. That said, however, you need to understand that while the Constitution here in the good old US of A says innocent until proven guilty, that does not apply to men and boys more often than not. Presume they'll be treating you as guilty until proven innocent, and keep your mouth shut, kids. Do not speak without your parents there. And adults, do not speak without your lawyer present. Don't say anything. Don't sign anything. Don't allow them to do anything unless they have a real court order. It will save you in the long run. I would know I made those mistakes. OP, you're a solid human being, and I really wish you the best. I hope you get all the help you need and continue doing right by your son, because as you already know and have shown, that kid is all that matters. The rest of it is bullshit. OP has asked that I don't link back to the original post and edited it a bit to not cause him ongoing issues with the case. So I hope y'all enjoyed story time with Safe today, new friends. Hit them like and sub buttons to make this your safe place, and I'll see you again for story time real soon.